Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Baseball Training for Older People Live.
Eric Berg is our guest, all the way from Minnesota. Been looking forward to talking to him for a while now. So I hope you guys will enjoy this episode. Hey, man.
Hey.
How's it going?
Good, good. Can you hear me well and all that?
Yeah, I hear you just fine. You hear me okay?
Yep, it's good. It is.
Good. I've really been looking forward to talking to you. Those pictures you sent me, man, you look like Babe Ruth. Has anybody ever said that to you?
Yeah, that's come up a few times. Yeah, when you get that old uniform on and I got the jowls going now and I'm getting a little older and heavier build. So, I've certainly got the people making the comment I look like. I'm not sure I hit anything like him, but I certainly look like him at times. So.
Well, very cool, very cool. Well, I appreciate you taking time out to do this.
Yeah.
I really found your story just, it kind of, I think maybe Bruce told me, that guy knows everybody, but, I found you through someone through here, and just really found your story interesting, and particularly your, how you've managed to incorporate this game into your coursework at the college that you teach at. So before we begin, would you just tell everybody where you are currently and tell a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So I taught at McMurray College, and that's one of the last McMurray College jerseys up there. I became really close friends with every baseball coach that came through McMurray College in the 15 years I was there. And Coach Grana was the last coach and was very generous towards the end because that college closed. So the college I taught for 15 years closed on June 1st, 2020. And I sat out the 2021 academic year. And then now I was hired at Bemidji State University in Minnesota to do essentially the same thing I was at McMurray College, teach philosophy there. So about 7 years ago or 6 years ago, our president of the college wanted senior faculty to create some courses that would bring freshmen in and hold them in the college. So he wanted some of the real experienced faculty to teach some introductory level courses that freshmen would want to take or sophomores would want to take, and then they'd have a good experience in the class and stay with the college. So it was an effort to keep some students in the college, and we got some latitude then in creating courses. And I've been involved with baseball my entire life in many aspects of it, playing it, umpiring, reading about it, publishing about it. And so I created this course called From Plato to Jackie Robinson, Social Political Philosophy in Baseball. And what the course does is it takes a look at the history of baseball from the very beginning to the modern game today, players that are still active today. And it talks about mostly the outsiders of the game. It divides the course into several aspects of people that have been excluded from playing Major League Baseball from one way or the other, and the importance of understanding that, and the tragedy that certainly has evolved from that sometimes, and the way the game has had to struggle from that. So most people know, quite a bit about African American players being kept out of the game, but they usually don't know the complex story behind that there were professional Black baseball players prior to the formalization of not allowing Black baseball players in, and then there's a huge dry spell. You get the blooming of the Negro Leagues, which you became very familiar with in Kansas City there.
Yeah.
I love that museum. And then you get the Jackie Robinson piece, and then we move forward with that. We take a look at the peak about 1971, 72. You get the most African American players in the game, and it's dropping off, and it continues to drop off to this day. And that raises some good questions for the students. We do gender after that. So we take a look at women in baseball. again, there were episodic, occasional women playing professional baseball. And when I say professional baseball, I don't always mean Major League Baseball, but I do mean paid to play in an organized league where most players are paid to play. So you get some instances of women playing early on in the professional ranks, and then you get a de facto ban where women can't play. And Major League Baseball never took the step to ban women, but the minor leagues did. So if you can't work through the minors and you can't play in college, the only chances you'd have of being discovered and signed as a woman playing Major League Baseball prior to the early 90s, in fact, would be through the amateur ranks, and that's almost impossible to do that, or maybe the international game would be a way. So we take a look at women in baseball, and we take a look at what's keeping women out of baseball. We take a look at the athlete, and there are some limiting factors in football and basketball, some physical limiting factors where you're just not going to play in the NBA if you don't have certain physical attributes, and the same in NFL. But in baseball, it's a lot about mechanics, and it's a lot about headspace if you can play well. So it's a very interesting question why women don't play professional baseball after that. And then you want me to just keep going with the other lists of who we talk about?
Please do.
Yeah, so talk about women in the sport extensively, and look at like Ila Borders. I had, just by a complete fluke, when Ila Borders pitched for the St. Paul Saints, I happened to be going to graduate school, and that ballpark, Midway Stadium, was right down the road where I was going. So I actually saw her pitch in St. Paul, and that's an important landmark event. So you get this creeping in of the possibility of women playing in Major League Baseball. One of the section of the class I'm actually the most uncomfortable with teaching is when I start talking about softball, because I never quite know how to frame it, because I usually have 10 or 12 really good softball players in my class, and you don't want to talk about it as a lesser sport. I certainly want to talk about it as a different sport, but there's real parallels to baseball, and you talk about a siphoning of talent. At about age 10 or 12, you get women move to the softball world, and men stay with baseball, and then eventually men go to the softball world too. But some of us do. Some of us still continue to play and chip bones and can't walk for 2 days, and etc. So I do know that feeling. So that's where I still have an awful lot of learning to do, is what do we do with softball? Do we end it and funnel women into the game of baseball? And of course, there's way too much money invested in the softball world for that to ever happen, because there's companies that make billions of dollars on selling softball equipment that are geared for the women's game. So that's a really interesting piece of that.
Yeah.
We talk about go ahead.
No, I was going to say that softball has also, I think it's becoming big, cash crop. It's become, a lot of people are just seemingly anyways to me, getting more interested in watching it. And yeah. I'll be honest with you, like I have enjoyed probably watching more softball than baseball in a lot of ways, just because there's so many nuances to it that you don't see in baseball, and certain things that my cousin played on a collegiate level, and there's some things that her dad was telling me that I just didn't know was part of the game, and it's really cool. So I don't think we're going to go away.
No, it's not going to go away. That's a curious part of that. It's going to be parallel to baseball, and it's going to take talented people into that realm. So I think it's slowing down the progress of the first woman to make the major leagues, but even the minor leagues and a contract. But you will need that special person. You will need that parallel to Jackie Robinson, certainly, to be able to do that. Yeah. The next piece we take up is religion in baseball. We look at some interesting aspects of some religious groups that have flourished inside of baseball, especially Jewish Americans that wanted to assimilate, not have this separate identity from the rest of American culture, much like the Irish. So when the Irish immigrated to the United States, there was a lot of discrimination against the Irish, and a lot of fathers wanted their sons to play baseball because that was the American sport. So you get this influx of a lot of professional Irish players in like the 1920s. After the potato famine, that next generation, they want to be identified as being American and not necessarily Irish. So the same thing happens with the Jewish population, particularly in New York City. You get this wanting to be identified as sort of integrated into America, despite having a very different religion than most people in the west of New York would be Protestant or Catholic. So we talk about that. And then the House of David, I don't know if you've heard about that barnstorming team in the 20s and 30s and 40s. They wore the long hair and they had lots of Jewish symbols to them, and very few of the players were Jewish. But this whole barnstorming thing where they tried to get unique players or unique teams together to draw tickets in, that was and it turned out it has this sort of ironic twist in the end. They marketed themselves somewhat. I guess their marketing plan was to be a Jewish baseball team with all the look of being very stereotypically Jewish. Mm-hmm. And then it turns out that the place that was funding all the baseball turned into a religious cult. One of those crazy cults that gets really insulated and the leader goes off the rails and lots of bad things happen. So there's a neat, interesting backstory with that.
Yeah.
We talk about the international player then. Is the next area that I go to and look at some of the barriers that are set up with the access to the major leagues. There's a really, really good film called Sugar. I don't know if you've seen that film. It's called Sugar. It's like it's half a movie, half a documentary, and it follows one player from getting drafted by the Royals in the Dominican. And it follows him into the minor league system with the Kansas City Royals. And what it really does is highlight, because this poor kid's taken from, this very small town in the Dominican, and then he's transplanted to like Lincoln, Nebraska, and is expected to play baseball out there at the same level he did in the DR. But there's nothing about his home as present in Lincoln, Nebraska. The only thing that he knows anymore is baseball. And of course, you get in that kind of headspace playing baseball, and it's not a good deal. So we look at the pressure that's put on international players, the use of a translator, the use of not being able to assimilate into the rest of the team. And then I also take a very close look at that, the really curious story of Yasiel Puig, his immigration into the United States, and the way that Major League Baseball clubs can essentially buy people into the United States. So if you have tremendous amount of baseball talent, the whole red tape with becoming a citizen can be circumvented by lawyers and by a lot of money. So that we study the Dodgers and their signing of Yasiel Puig and bringing him over. Yeah. The next thing we look at is sexual orientation in baseball. We look at Billy Beane and the articles of inclusion that Major League Baseball has put a push on for, and Billy Beane, of course, is a very articulate leader in baseball. So there's some really great film on Billy Beane, and we look at the issues are getting more and more complicated in the class, because you start with race and gender, and then you go to religion, and then you go to sexual orientation, and they get a little more touchy. And of course, we have to talk about issues in the dugout and in the locker room with the kind of culture that's usually at a baseball dugout or a baseball locker room, and how that is going to affect a particular player along those lines.
Speaking of that, I have a hard, I think just on the other side of the Me Too movement and everything, and I don't slap players on their butts anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think any of the guys would have a problem with. Every now and then I feel one land on me, and it's just part of baseball culture, right? But it's just something that I think from what I do for a living, and I just fist bump now, or pat him on the shoulder or something. But
so. Exactly, that is a pretty strong part of baseball culture, and I think COVID is helping maybe move that away too. But the slap on the butt is something that you're seeing older coaches still do, and you see it in the major leagues a little bit and stuff. But It's been a while since I've had that, and I've had the pleasure of having women play on several of my amateur teams that I play on. So you just
Yeah.
kind of all of a sudden there's a little bit of a culture shift there when that happens.
Well, yeah, your course is really cool, and I wish we would have had something like that when I was in school. I know I've been paying attention to your Facebook feed, and there's kind of this whole underground academic world
There is.
of baseball. I mean, you went to a conference recently. It was just a
Yeah.
baseball conference, right?
Yeah, there's two really good academic baseball conferences. One is Baseball and Culture and Literature. It's hosted by Ottawa University in Kansas, and they bring in like two major speakers a year. J.R. Richard was scheduled to be there this year, but he was sick, of course, when we had it, and then he passed not long after it. But I met Pedro Martinez, one of the last living Negro League players alive. I met Bill James at that conference. And the other really good one is called The Nine, just The Nine. It's hosted mostly out of the University of Nebraska, and they host it down in spring training every year, usually in Arizona. So you go to some spring training games, and there's just, there's all these different sections. They'll talk about women in baseball and the early game and etc.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the objective with those conferences?
To bring new research forward, to keep unearthing new research about baseball and get some new ideas about baseball out there. Like, for instance, at the Ottawa conference, the paper that I gave at the Ottawa conference, the first black professional baseball player in the state of Minnesota happened to be from 25 miles where I grew up. And I grew up in very remote part of Minnesota, the west central part, so right off the North Dakota border in a very small town. But it just happened that a guy named Prince Honeycutt was the first black professional baseball player in Minnesota. 1873 is when he formed a team in Fergus Falls, and it was a paid professional team. And that's remarkable. And that story has not been told. It's just it's in the newspaper archives in the local historical society, which is fantastic. The Ottertail County Historical Society is great with that. But he just didn't really get a lot of light put on him yet. So I presented that at in Ottawa, and I'm going to publish that through the University of Nebraska's press, a little story of his life. And then, like, another paper that I saw at the Ottawa conference that was really interesting, a guy did a statistical analysis, and he makes the case that the Astros banging with the trash cans didn't help anybody's hitting. He looked at every one of those at-bats where they would find the clear audible evidence of that. And I know it's just counterintuitive, but that's...
Well, let me speak to that.
Yeah.
I took back. We were doing some spring training stuff this year with our team, and one of our really good pitchers, he was doing bullpen, and I just asked him. I was like, "Hey, do you care if I bat against you? While you're doing bullpen, And he goes, "Yeah, let me get 20 good throws in, and then he'll do his back half. He'll let me hit,
Mm-hmm.
He told me every pitch that was coming.
Yeah.
And well, now I feel pressured to hit that ball because if you know what's coming, you should be able to hit it in your mind, right?
Yeah.
And I had the hardest time hitting him.
Yeah.
Because I think it's because I knew what was coming.
Yeah.
So
there's a lot to be said for
psychology.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's part of my game back. Behind the plate, I play with some of these guys a lot, and I know a lot about their hitting because we talk about hitting, because sometimes it doesn't go very well. And when they're playing on the other team, there's one of my particular friends I know, we've talked about hitting a lot. He needs an absolutely clean head when he's up there.
Mm-hmm.
When he steps in the box, he doesn't want to think about anything. He just wants to see the ball. I'll tell him what's coming.
Yeah.
I'll get down there and I'll go, it's curveball. And he'll step out and he's like, damn it, Bergie, don't do that, But I'll tell him, we're throwing a curveball, and then that's in his head. And, so I get that. It does put additional pressure on it, and you start thinking about it, and then you start looking for it, and then you're all twisted up at that point, you know. So,
yeah. Man, it was so good having you on here.
This is fun.
I wish, I hope someday our paths can cross and we can have lunch or something, and maybe even play some ball or something together. But in the meantime, let's stay in touch through this group and
For sure.
Post some videos.
Yeah, appreciate it. Well, thank you for having me on. And I really do want to cross paths over a beer and then over, over in 7 innings or something. It'd be fun too.
It's so awesome. Yeah. Appreciate having you.
Yes, thank you.
We'll see you around. All right.
Yep. Good night.
That was a fun interview, guys. Appreciate those that you watching. Stan Tate. I agree with you, Stan. Stan says a great show, very insightful, educational. Love this episode. One of my favorite episodes we did was the one that Stan did. But I would agree, this was a really fun episode to watch. Anyways, guys, I'm going to let you go. It is approaching 10 o'clock right now, and I'm tired and I'm beat up. And I'm ready. And I'm ready to go to bed. So I'm going to let this try to start my healing journey for this knee, because we got the MSBO World Series in October, and I need to be ready for it. So you guys take care. We'll see you next time. Bye.